Worship is not the responsibility of a few people. Worship is not the responsibility of a choir or a praise team or musicians or the deacons or the ministers. Worship of God is the responsibility of every person who knows his name. Can I get a witness? And worship into God's people is not considered optional. Come on, because one of the things we want to do, we want to get to the place where there is a thriving and exciting worship experience. How many of you want that when we come to church? I don't want to come into church and sit by a bunch of dead folk. I don't want to come into church and then leave church and wonder, was I at All Nations or was I at Riley's funeral home? There's something about when you engage yourself in worship with God. There is something about when you set aside all of the mess that you've been through, when you set aside all of the obstacles that you've had to come through, when you set aside all of the mental interference that Satan has been putting upon you all week, and when you really focus on God, those of you who know what I'm talking about, you can't help. We think that worship is to be initiated from us. And the problem becomes trying to get people to move God. And so when people try to move God, then we come with the wrong motive. Listen to me. Worship is always, somebody say always. Worship is always a response to God. Worship is always a response to God. Worship is always a response to God. Worship is always a response. God is the originator, creator. God is the one who began the earth. God created us. God sustains us. When God created man, he introduced man to himself and said, I'm the one who put the stars in place. I'm the one who put the earth in its place. I'm the one who puts the sun in its circuit. I'm the one who hangs the stars in the blue ether of the nocturnal night. I'm the one who breathes life into your soul. I'm the one who provides for you and protects you. I'm God. And when you come before me not like I'm the man upstairs. Come before me not like I'm your brother. Come before me like I'm God of the universe. It is always a response to God. It is always me responding to God for who he is and what he's done. I got to move on, but let me ask you, anybody in the room, has God ever done anything? Come on. Has God, somebody in here, he touched your body. Somebody in here, he's made a way out of no way. Slap somebody, high five, and then tell them he's worthy. I said he's worthy. Don't be funny with it. He's worthy of my worship. Now, I don't care who you are up in here. If you belong to God, you have a responsibility to worship God. He says, first of all, when it comes to God, make some noise. I feel my preach coming on. I'm trying to quit over here. But now watch this. Not only do we make a noise, but the noise ought to be declarative and it ought to be distinctive. Watch this. That's why you got to be careful what you hear and what goes on in service, because every noise is not worship. Every noise that goes on, every song is not worship. Every singer is not worshiping. Every sermon is not worship. Every preacher is, I wish I had some folk here who were listening to me. Every act is not worship. But watch what he says. He says, watch it. Here's one way you can tell. Make a The noise ought to have a distinct sound. It ought to be joyful. I wish I could get 2 or 3 people to really understand this. That when we come to church, church ought to be edifying. It ought to be lifting us up. People who are down in the dirt ought to realize that God can reach down in the pit. When I get through with worship, if I'm in the pit, I ought to know God specializes in picking folk up out of a pit. If I failed and sinned and feel separated from God, when I leave church, I ought to feel like there is no distance and no chasm that God cannot breach to reach me. When I worship, if I feel down in the dumps, watch out. That's why I'm careful about who I talk to. I know folk always got something they won't say, but let me tell you something, baby. When I come to church, I'm careful about who I talk to. I'm careful about who I sit next to in worship, because I didn't come for form or fashion, as the old folks say. I didn't come to be seen. And just because I'm the pastor, I got just as many needs as everybody else. And I don't know about you, but if I don't hear from God, if I don't get a touch from God, preach, Pastor McClendon. So when I come here, I ain't got time to be talking about who was with who said what to who did what and who didn't. Baby, let all that handle outside. I need to hear from God. I need to know that as hard as the times are, I need somebody to reach in my ear and say, don't get nervous. The Lord is my I need somebody when the enemy's been beating on my head and I feel like I'm defeated. I need somebody to grab me and say, listen, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Of whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even my enemies, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp round about me, yet in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of his tabernacle. When I come to worship, I ought to be lifted up.